The world stretched in silence, broken only by the groan of shifting ice and the whisper of a wind that never ceased. The tundra sprawled without mercy, a canvas of frozen stone and pale horizons where nothing stirred for days. Survival here was no gift, but a war fought every waking hour. The cold gnawed at bone in the air, too thin to nourish, seemed intent on starving breath itself. Yet the human endured. Each step across that endless wasteland was a defiance, a refusal to let the universe finish what it started. The environment was not merely hostile. It was deliberate in its cruelty, a reminder that fragility and strength were two sides of the same coin. In such a place, silence was not peace, but the echo of death lingering just out of sight. He was the last, or so he believed. His name had become irrelevant. Names were for people who still had someone to call them. What mattered was survival, a ritual he practiced like a religion. Each movement, checking the seals of his gear, conserving water rations, salvaging scraps, was performed with a reverence born from necessity. Memories haunted him as much as the hunger did. He remembered voices once carried by laughter, faces that no longer existed except in the fragile gallery of his mind, where others had fallen, through cold, through famine, through despair. He remained, not because he was stronger, but because he refused to surrender. If fire was life, then he was its keeper, the last flame stubborn enough to cling to existence in a universe that seemed determined to extinguish humanity's fragile spark. A strip of cloth, once part of a child's jacket. A cracked photo, edges frayed by frost. These were the treasures he carried, reminders of a world that felt less like memory and more like myth. Each artifact was both comfort and torment, a whisper of what had been stolen. Sometimes, when exhaustion weighed too heavily, he pressed them to his chest and pretended warmth could return. But the illusion always broke. The past was gone, and clinging to it too tightly threatened to shatter him as surely as a cold. Yet he could not let go. Not entirely. His survival was not owed to fortune, but to the ingenuity hammered into humanity across centuries. A scavenged plasma torch, retooled into a crude heater. A tangle of wires repurposed into snares for creatures that scuttle beneath the ice. A helmet visor scratched and cracked, but still filtering poison from breath. Nothing matched, nothing belonged together, yet everything functioned. Human hands had forged miracles from ruins, bending broken machines into lifelines. Each creation reminded him of the legacy of his kind, resourcefulness in the face of annihilation. Still, every tool felt temporary, fragile against a vast hostility surrounding him. Metal rusted, wires frayed, and power cells drained. He lived not in security, but in constant repair, fighting entropy with stubborn resolve. The battle was endless, but giving immense silence. He gathered what little remained. Slivers of fuel, shards of broken tech, even bone fragments from forgotten beasts. All of it fed into the pit he had carved in the ice. With careful hands, he coaxed the spark to life. The fire flared, fragile and trembling, yet it was enough. The glow painted the hollow in amber light, throwing shadows that felt less like threats and more like ghosts keeping watch. Heat seeped into him, easing the ache of frozen joints. For a moment, he was not merely surviving, he was living. The fire was defiance incarnate. It was a refusal to surrender, the essence of humanity condensed into flickering flame. Against the indifference of the cosmos, it declared, I exist, I endure, but the light carried risk. It was warmth and life for him, but to the world beyond it was a beacon. The flame could not burn unseen. Somewhere, something might be watching. The fire's glow crawled across the ice, a silent shout into the void. To him, it was salvation, but to others, if others existed, it was an invitation. His eyes lingered on the horizon, the vast emptiness where night met night. He knew the dangers, scavengers who would kill for scraps, predators drawn by heat, even storms that could swallow him whole. The flame did not discriminate between ally and enemy. It summoned both. Still, he fed it, because survival was not possible without risk. Every spark risked discovery. Every ember whispered to the universe, here I am. As he huddled close, shadows curling around him, the truth pressed heavier than the cold. Humanity had always needed connection, but here, trust could be fatal. To extend a hand might mean salvation or betrayal. He stared into the fire, its glow reflected in tired eyes. It was warmth, but also vulnerability, a fragile signal pulsing into the night. He whispered to himself, not words of prayer, but a question no flame could answer. If someone came, if something answered the fire's call, would he welcome it, or would it be the end of him? The fire burned low, its glow a fragile shield against the vastness of the night. Beyond its reach stretched an ocean of darkness, thick and impenetrable, the kind that devoured sound and light alike. It was into that silence that the figure emerged. At first it seemed a trick of the flame, a wavering silhouette thrown by smoke and wind. But as the human's eyes narrowed, the shape held its ground. Cloaked, stooped, faintly humanoid. Instinct flared. Every nerve screamed warning. In this world, strangers meant danger more often than salvation. Yet something deeper stirred alongside the caution, a reluctant compassion, a memory of what it meant to see another shape walking upright, carrying the weight of existence. The firelight licked across the figure's edges, rendering it half seen, half guessed. An invitation, but also a challenge. It dared him to act, to reach out or retreat. The human's breath slowed, steady and deliberate, as he felt the weight of choice settle over him like the cold itself. His hands moved before his thoughts could settle. A crust of hardened ration bread, saved for later, cracked beneath his fingers. He extended it toward the shadow, holding in the light where both could see. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the figure edged closer, slow as the drifting snow. The cloak rustled faintly, a sound too soft to belong in a place so starved of life. A pale hand reached, tentative yet desperate, and closed around the food. The human shifted, angling his body so the fire stood between them, both barrier and bridge. He gestured toward the flames, offering not command but choice. The figure lowered itself, joints bending awkwardly, as if unused to such posture. The silence remained, but it was no longer empty. It held tension, fragile yet alive, like ash carried on a breath of wind. He felt it stir something he had thought buried. The faint ache of kinship. Fire was survival, yes, but in this moment it was more. It was communion. Words proved useless. Whatever tongue the stranger possessed did not match his own. Yet hunger and cold spoke a universal language. He tapped his chest, said his name softly, then pointed at the other. A tilt of the hood, a pause, but no sound. So he shifted to gestures. A wave of the hand for food, a curl of the fingers for rest, a pointing motion toward the fire. The figure responded haltingly, mimicking the motions with eerie precision. When snow drifted too close, he nudged more fuel into flames. The stranger mirrored him, pale hand steadying the crackling wood as though it had studied fire only from afar. Together, they fed the flame, small motions becoming a shared act. No words, no understanding, yet something unspoken began to weave between them. Trust, thin and trembling, stretched across the divide like the first threads of a fragile bridge. And yet, under it, unease coiled. For every mirrored gesture, the human wondered, was it mimicry born of need, or something far stranger? It was in the firelight that details emerged. A glimpse beneath the cloak revealed skin too smooth, unblemished by weather or time. Eyes caught the flame and reflected it back in sharp glimmers, almost metallic, too precise to belong to flesh. When the bread touched its lips, the chewing seemed deliberate, as though rehearsed rather than natural. He forced calm into his breathing. Perhaps starvation made him see ghosts. Perhaps this was simply another wanderer, hardened by exile as he was. Yet doubt gnawed. The hand that tore bread did not tremble with the weakness of hunger. It moved with unsettling grace, every joint measured, each flex too precise. When he shifted suddenly, testing, the figure responded instantly, flinching in perfect sync, as if anticipation had outpaced reaction. That was no accident. That was design. Loneliness urged him to believe in another human presence. But training, instinct carved into bone, warned otherwise. Ally, threat, or something unmeasured. The question burned hotter than the fire itself. And in its silence, the figure gave no answer. The storm outside thickened, wind howling like the voices of the dead. Snow whipped against the edges of their hollow, and with it came faint sounds, low growls carried on the gale, the distant scrape of claws against ice. The humans stiffened, senses sharp. Predators prowled these lands, beasts that stalked warmth as surely as they hunted blood. The fire's glow, once comfort, now felt like a flare to everything lurking in the dark. He reached for the crude spear resting by his side. The figure tilted its head, reflective eyes glinting as if understanding more than he wished it to. It raised no weapon, but its posture shifted, coiled, alert, predator's stillness echoing his own. A noise closer now, crunching snow, a guttural snarl. His grip tightened. He cast a quick glance at the stranger. Was his presence a shield against danger, or the very magnet that drew it? The fire spat sparks, hissing into the storm, daring the world to step closer. And the world answered with silence broken by another growl, nearer this time. He weighed his options in a heartbeat. Expel the stranger, and perhaps the beast would follow it, sparing him. Keep it close, and perhaps together they would stand a chance. But survival alone had already carved him hollow. The memory of nights with nothing but silence pressed against his mind, crueler than hunger. And now, here was a being, human or not, that shared his fire. To cast it out was to choose solitude again, and perhaps death alongside it. His voice came low, barely more than a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile accord. Stay. The word hung between them, meaningless perhaps, but the tone carried weight. The figure shifted closer to the fire, shadows cloaking whatever expression it wore. Fear remained, cold and sharp, but so did necessity, and the line between them blurred with every flicker of flame. As the storm clawed at the edges of their fragile refuge, a slip occurred. The cloak shifted when the figure reached for more fuel, and for the briefest moment the hand was bare. The human froze. The skin was not skin. It shimmered faintly, translucent as glass, veins glowing faintly beneath with a light that pulsed in rhythm to no heartbeat he had ever known. He said nothing, breath caught in his throat. The figure stilled, as if realizing what had been seen. Slowly, deliberately, it pulled the cloak back around itself. When it finally looked up, the eyes were no longer merely reflective. They burned with something deeper, awareness, acknowledgement, a silent admission of what had been revealed. The human's chest tightened. This was no fellow survivor, no kin. The stranger at his fire was something entirely other. And yet it had not struck. It had not fled. It remained. The flame hissed, throwing sparks upward like stars, as silence stretched taut. For the first time in many years, the human found himself unsure whether to reach for his weapon, or to keep the fire alive for them both. The storm did not relent. Snow and ash drifted in suffocating sheets, piling against the crude circle of stones that barely held the fire alive. The human knew their meager refuge would not last. Without shelter, they would both be buried or frozen before the sun returned. He rose and began dragging broken timbers into place, shaping crude walls against the wind. The stranger watched with a drawn low, posture unreadable. For a long while, it did nothing. Then, as if spurred by some unspoken decision, it joined him. Together they hauled stone, wedged driftwood into frozen earth, and piled snow into barriers. The stranger's movements were unsettlingly efficient, its strength deceptive for such a slight frame. When it lifted a stone twice its size and set it down without strain, the human's breath hitched. He massed it with a grunt, unwilling to reveal fear. Yet the work continued. Sweat froze against his brow. Ice clung to his gloves. Each motion was echoed by the figure at his side. Awkward cooperation, driven not by trust, but by survival. Still, in those hours of labor, something softened. No words passed, but necessity drew them into rhythm. Two beating hearts against the endless void of the storm. When the walls stood tall enough to blunt the wind, they huddled by the flame once more. Speech was useless, so silence filled the hollow like a second fire. The human glanced often, studying. Each time he caught the reflective gleam of eyes fixed on him, quick to dart away. When he reached for food, the stranger tilted its head. When he coughed against the smoke, it shifted closer, sliding a stone to redirect the airflow. A language emerged, born of gestures and glances, the flick of fingers to signal danger, the nod of a head toward fuel for fire, the faintest tug of the mouth, not quite a smile, when a wall held against a gale. Loneliness had been a wound long carried in silence. Now, though trust remained far, the ache eased. Intimacy bloomed not from words, but from the simple fact of being witnessed, of knowing someone else's breath mingle with the smoke, someone else's heartbeat thudded against the cold. It was fragile, unspoken, but it mattered, and the human, despite all reason, found himself reluctant to let it go. The moment came suddenly. While stacking a final brace of timber, the stranger's hand slipped. The sharp edge bit into its palm, slicing deep. The human expected blood, dark, red, familiar. What spilled instead seared itself into his mind. Luminous fluid, glowing faintly like molten stars, spilling in rivulets before sealing itself almost instantly across the wound. The skin rippled, knitting with unnatural smoothness until no trace remained. He stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. His spear hand twitched but did not rise. The stranger froze, its reflective eyes burning into his. For the first time, he saw something break through its mask. Fear. The glow of its blood lit the air between them, all war with horror in his chest. This was no human. This was something far beyond his understanding. A predator wearing borrowed form? A machine clothed in flesh? Every instinct screamed danger. Yet another part of him, stubborn and deeply human, whispered, "It bleeds. And if it bleeds, it suffers." The fire crackled, mocking the silence that followed. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The revelation gnawed at him with every heartbeat. He replayed the image of glowing blood, of flesh sealing without scar. He remembered the strength in those hands, the mirrored gestures, the eerie precision of its movements. Had he invited death into his firelight? He considered driving the spear through its chest while it rested, ending the question before it ended him. The thought lingered, sharp and cold, and it sickened him to feel how easy it would be. But another voice rose, the part of him that had offered bread, that had chosen company over solitude. It had built walls beside him, tended fire with him, and bled, if glowing ichor counted as blood, before his eyes. Was he wrong to call it other? Was the line between predator and companion so clear? His hands trembled. Survival demanded caution. Compassion demanded trust. And between them, his heart threatened to tear itself apart. The stranger moved first. From beneath its cloak, it withdrew something small, glowing faintly, cupped between long fingers. It resembled crystal, but it pulsed faintly, alive with inner light. It held it out, not close, but with a gesture that spoke of offering. The human's chest tightened. Suspicion bristled, but he forced himself to respond. Slowly, he reached for his belt and drew his knife, not raised as threat, but turned in his palm. The steel caught the firelight, dull but sharp, the simplest of human tools. He laid it between them. The fire flickered, shadows dancing across their faces as artifact and knife rested side by side. Alien crystal and human steel, symbols of two worlds bound by survival. The stranger tilted its head, eyes narrowing. Then, with startling delicacy, it reached to trace the blade's edge, as if memorizing its weight. When it looked back, its gaze softened, no longer predator-sharp, but something else, acknowledgement. In that moment, the gulf between them narrowed, if only by a fraction, but closeness carried its own friction. When the human offered dried meat, the stranger recoiled, head shaking in sharp refusal. When it pressed the glowing crystal to wall, strengthening the structure, he flinched at the alien hum, imagining radiation eating at his marrow. Misunderstandings bloomed like sparks in dry tinder, a gesture mistaken for insult, a sound heard as threat. Each misstep carved tension into the fragile trust. Yet with each clash came curiosity. He found himself studying its rituals, the way it traced symbols in the ash before sleeping, the way it tilted its head toward the sky, as though listening for voices beyond hearing. And when it caught him watching, it did not turn away. Instead, it mirrored him again, copying his gesture of touching chest, pausing as if trying to grasp the meaning of heart. The questions grew heavier. Was trust built on sameness, or on the willingness to bridge difference. The storm finally broke. In its silence came other sounds, low growls circling beyond the fire's reach, the scrape of claws against stone. Predators had found their scent. The human rose, spear gripped tight, every nerve alive. The stranger followed, posture shifting into that same coiled stillness, ready. Then came another sound, distant shouts, harsh and human. Shapes move against the pale horizon, scavengers drawn by the smoke. Desperation or malice, he could not tell. Both meant danger. The fire, once their shield, had betrayed them. Its glow had called every threat near. He looked at the stranger. Its gaze met his. Neither spoke, but the truth was clear. Isolation was no longer their enemy. The world itself had come to claim them. The shadows pressed closer, fangs and steel alike waiting just beyond the flickering line of firelight. The choice loomed like a blade at his throat. Stand alone, spear in hand, against beasts and scavengers both, or accept the stranger decide, with all the danger it carried. Fear thundered through him. The memory of glowing blood seared his thoughts. But alongside it rose another memory. Walls built in the storm, gestures shared in silence, the echo of breath that was not his own. His grip on the spear wavered. Slowly, he shifted his stance, not toward the stranger but beside it. The predators snarled in the dark. The scavengers' voices drew nearer. He did not know if trust would save him or kill him, but he knew solitude would end him for certain. The fire hissed, throwing sparks into the night. The line was drawn, not of certainty, but of choice. As the shadows closed in, the two stood shoulder to shoulder, bound by necessity, fear, and the faintest ember of hope. The firelight flickered against strained faces, shadows carved deep across stone and snow. The human spear trembled in his hand, sweat freezing along his brow, despite the bitter cold. The scavengers' shouts drew nearer, the growls of unseen predators echoing like thunder from a void. And then the stranger faltered, its frame convulsed, as though the storm itself had seized hold. The cloak slipped aside, revealing flesh too fluid, too precise to belong to any human shell. Skin rippled as though liquid beneath a thin membrane, shifting in unnatural waves. A voice followed, resonant and layered, vibrating through air and bone alike. Not one voice, but many, woven together in a chorus of alien frequency. Eyes that had once mirrored firelight now burned with bioluminescent fire, shifting hues of green and violet that pierced straight into his marrow. Its outline flickered, parts of its body blurring, as if reality strained to contain it. No disguise remained. What crouched beside the human now was not kin, not companion, but a being utterly alien, a creature from a void beyond the stars. The human's chest clenched. Trust, fragile as ash, cracked under the weight of revelation. The stranger's mask was gone, and the truth it revealed was both terrible and magnificent. Betrayal surged through him, sharp and bitter. He remembered its hand steadying the wall, its silence echoing his own, its strange attempt to mirror his gestures of the heart. All of it now seemed like a performance, a manipulation draped in human shape. This was no lost wanderer, no ally in solitude. It was something other, something vast, unknowable, dangerous. His instinct screamed to run, to strike, to sever all ties before its true nature devoured him, yet awed tangled with the fear. For in those luminous eyes was no cruelty, only exhaustion and a flicker of something he could not name. Not human, not familiar, but not void of meaning either. The line between predator and companion blurred once more, this time sharper than ever. He had glimpsed its truth, and now the question clawed at his mind. Could survival be found in unity with something so inhuman? Or had he already doomed himself by lighting the fire at all? The night closed in. From one side came the guttural snarls of beasts with eyes glowing faintly in the dark, fangs glistening as they paced just beyond the reach of flame. From the other, shadows rose along the ridge, scavengers, wrapped in furs and greed, blades gleaming faintly as they descended toward a fragile shelter. The fire hissed and popped, its circle of warmth shrinking as the storm stole its strength. The human knew the odds. Alone, he could not face both. Even armed, even desperate, he would fall. The alien's form glimmered faintly, its skin alive with shifting light. its gaze locked not on him but on the encroaching threats. For a heartbeat, predator and prey became indistinguishable. The beasts roared, closer now. The scavengers shouted, voices rough with hunger and hate. Steel met Fong, and yet both sought the same prize: fire, food, and flesh. The human tightened his grip on the spear. The alien's hands pulsed with bioluminescence, alien veins humming faintly with energy that should not exist. They stood back to back, not in trust, but in necessity. The fire's glow painted their silhouettes, a fragile wall between annihilation and defiance. There was no time left for doubt. The storm silence fractured under the chorus of predators and the grinding boots of scavengers. The human made the choice with a single shift of stance. He raised a spear not at the alien, but outward toward the circling danger. His heart thundered, unsure if it was courage or madness. The alien responded. Its form pulsed brighter, bioluminescence spreading in veins across its arms, casting eerie patterns against the snow. A low resonance vibrated from its chest, neither growl nor song, but something that set the predators shuddering in hesitation. The human moved first, thrusting the spear at the scavengers advancing downhill. The alien moved beside him, raising a hand that shimmered with alien energy, bending the air with power unseen. They fought not as allies of trust, but as creatures bound by the same fragile instinct. Survive the night. Every motion was sharpened by fear, every step uncertain. Yet necessity forged a bridge stronger than words. Survival now demanded unity, no matter the chasm between worlds. The clash came sudden and violent. Beasts lunged through the snow, claws raking. The human met the first with a roar, driving his spear through its flank, hot blood hissing as it struck the fire. Another slammed into the wall of stones, sending sparks into the dark. The scavengers struck from the ridge, blades flashing. One lunged at the human's unguarded side, but light flared. The alien's hand snapped outward, and a burst of shimmering resonance rippled through the air, sending the attacker sprawling as though crushed by unseen weight. The human seized a moment, wrenching the spear free, spinning to face the next. He fought with every ounce of grit left in him. Parries, thrusts, raw survival in each strike. The alien moved alongside, weaving patterns of light and sound that disoriented the predators, twisting their senses until they turned on each other in confusion. Yet the cost was heavy. A scavenger's blade found the human's arm, biting deep. Pain tore through him. Hot and wet, his spear wavered. He staggered, nearly falling. But then came light, bioluminescence brighter than fire, a wave of energy that cascaded from the alien, hurling beasts back into the dark. The fire blazed higher, fed by something beyond wood and flame, painting the night in hues of violet and gold. For a moment, they stood as one. Human steel and alien light, fire and resonance locked in defiance against the encroaching void. The battle surged, and the human faltered. His arm bled freely, strength draining. A beast barreled through the smoke, jaws wide enough to crush bone. He raised the spear, but too slowly, too weak. The alien moved faster than sight. Light flared from its chest, wrapping around its body like living armor. It threw itself into the beast's path, luminous limbs colliding with claw and fang. A shock wave burst outward, rattling the human's teeth, casting snow in a blinding storm. The predator fell broken, chest caved as if struck by thunder itself. The alien staggered, its form flickering, patches of skin collapsing into shifting translucence. Yet its gaze locked on him, unwavering. The human stumbled forward, dragging the alien back as scavengers pressed close. His spear lashed out, his body fueled not by strength but by fury. Side by side, they carved a path through fang and steel until silence claimed the night once more. He had been saved, not by human hands, but by something wholly other, and in turn, he had chosen to save it as if it were kin. Smoke hung heavy, fire burned low. Around them lay carcasses of beasts and scavengers alike, blood steaming against the snow. The human leaned on his spear, chest heaving. Beside him, the alien's light dimmed to a faint pulse, its form steadier but fragile. For the first time, he did not see predator or stranger. He saw a being that had bled, fought, and endured at his side. Their eyes met across the fire's glow. No words could bridge the gulf of language, but none were needed. In that silence, recognition passed between them, born not of trust or kinship, but survival, carved in blood and ash. Dawn crept slow, casting pale light across the ruined shelter. The danger had passed, but unease lingered. The human studied the alien, questions pressing like weights against his chest. Why had it come here? Why had it hidden itself in human form? And why, in the midst of battle, had it revealed power that defied reason? The alien did not answer. It simply gazed toward the horizon, where the storm's remnants parted to reveal distant stars. Its bioluminescence pulsed faintly rhythm-steady, as though it waited for something beyond his understanding. The human realized then this was no chance meeting. He had not merely shared fire with a lost wanderer. He had stepped into currents far larger, forces that stretched beyond his world. The fire crackled, fragile against a vast silence. Victory had come, but truth remained fractured. And somewhere beyond the horizon, something greater was already stirring. The fire that had been their shield against the night was little more than a scattering of glowing embers. Smoke curled upward in frail ribbons, pulled into the cold breath of dawn. Around it lay the ruin of the night's violence. Splintered wood, broken stone, carcasses stiffening in the frost. Two figures remained upright among the wreckage, bound not by kinship, but by survival. The human leaned heavily on his spear, each breath ragged, blood drying along his arm. Beside him, the alien's bioluminescence dimmed to a faint pulse, its form settling but never entirely still, as though reality strained to contain it. Neither spoke. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the wind and the faint crackle of dying embers. What lingered between them was not victory, but the uneasy knowledge of what it had cost, and what it had revealed. Pain was written across both forms. The human's arm throbbed where steel had bitten deep, the sting made worse by the cold. Every motion was a reminder of flesh's fragility. He bound it clumsily with cloth torn from his tunic, each not a test of endurance. But worse than flesh were the wounds of trust. He had watched the alien's disguise collapse, had seen the truth it had hidden, had fought beside powers that bent the air itself. Each memory unsettled him more than torn skin ever could. The alien, too, bore its own strain. Its bioluminescence flickered unevenly, patches of its form trembling with instability. It sat rigid, movements economical, as if every gesture risked further collapse. Yet its gaze returned often to him, not hostile, but unreadable, as though measuring whether their fragile bond still held. They were both scarred, not just in body, but in spirit. The human's mind drifted to the loneliness that had shadowed him long before this night. He remembered empty paths, the silence of isolation, the endless weight of surviving without another voice to share it. His solitude had been his greatest enemy, a hunger sharper than any wound. And now, beside him sat something that was not solitude, yet not companionship either. The alien was utterly other. Its eyes glowed with shifting hues that no human iris could hold. Its body pulsed with light, as if blood itself carried luminescence. Even when still, its form whispered of forces beyond human comprehension. He felt the gulf between them as keenly as the frost. Human and alien, flesh and resonance, each a prisoner of their own isolation, one shackled by loneliness, the other by its strangeness. Yet necessity had bound them together. Perhaps not fate, perhaps not trust, but something close enough to defy both. For the first time in countless nights, the human no longer felt entirely alone. The silence between them was no longer empty, but shared. The alien's gaze, steady and unblinking, did not judge, did not reject. It simply existed alongside him, as though acknowledging that two beings so different could still endure together. He noticed how its bioluminescence softened when their eyes met, a faint glow more subtle than the violent bursts of battle. Was it deliberate? A gesture of peace? He could not know, but in that fragile glow, he saw something he had thought long dead, the possibility of connection. It was not trust. It was not friendship, but it was enough to spark a fragile thread between worlds, proof that even across species boundaries, something could be shared. And that fragile thread was more powerful than loneliness. Yet doubt gnawed at him like hunger. Trust born in battle was as fragile as smoke. Was this kinship real, or only desperation, the illusion of safety forged by shared survival? When the fire was gone, when strength returned, would the alien turn on him? Or worse, reveal that every step had been calculated, every gesture designed to keep him alive for purposes unknown? He studied its face, or what passed for one. The alien tilted its head, its expression unreadable. Did it wonder the same of him? Did it question whether the human spear might one day turn inward? Neither could know. Suspicion lingered like ash in the air, clinging to every thought. Fragile trust was a flame too small to warm them fully. But illusion or not, it had carried them through the night, and in a world so hostile. Perhaps that was enough. Dawn stretched across the horizon, pale light breaking the darkness, revealing the scars of the night in stark detail. The human rose slowly, spear in hand, eyes on the path that wound into the unknown. Every instinct told him to part ways here, to sever the fragile thread before it became a chain. He had survived alone before, and perhaps he could again. But another voice whispered deeper. The memory of standing alone against beasts, of bleeding in the snow, of near death swallowed only by alien light. Alone, he would not have seen this dawn. Alone, he might not see another. The alien rose as well, its gaze locked on him. Unspoken question heavy in the silence. It did not move to leave, nor to approach. The choice lingered between them. Separate paths, uncertain and solitary, or a single path bound by necessity, shadowed by mistrust, but forged in shared blood. The crossroads lay bare, and as the sun rose higher, the human understood. Whatever choice was made here would shape not only their survival, but the meaning of everything endured. The fire had begun as nothing more than a defense against cold and hunger. Yet, in its brief life, it had become more than fuel and flame. For the human, it had been a shield. For the alien, a revelation. Together, it had burned as a fragile bridge, spanning a gulf that reason insisted was unbridgeable. Ashes now drifted on the wind, but the memory of shared warmth endured. Survival had been its first gift, but understanding, raw, uncertain, incomplete, was its second. The dying embers whispered a truth neither could ignore. Something new had been born in the dark. The alien's gaze no longer lingered on the human, nor on the smoldering ashes between them. Instead, it turned upward, where the night sky stretched vast and unyielding. Stars glimmered like cold fire, infinite and distant, yet alive with meaning only it seemed to comprehend. Its eyes reflected the starlight, glowing with an intensity that spoke of longing or perhaps remembrance. Whatever it sought was not here in the frost and ruin, but far beyond. The human, watching in silence, realized that his companion's thoughts traveled to realms and wars far outside his small firelit circle of survival. The silence stretched until it broke. A voice emerged, uneven, halting, but clear for the first time. "Not chance," the alien whispered, its tone a resonance that seemed to ripple the very air. "They hunt, they come." The words carried weight heavier than any wound, heavier even than battle's blood. Its head tilted, eyes still locked on the stars, as though the heavens themselves concealed the enemy it feared. Shadows moved in the void, unseen but not unfelt, and the human knew with an instinct deeper than thought that his survival had been woven into threads of something vast. A chill crawled along the human spine, one colder than any night wind. He had thought survival beside the stranger was a battle, but now he understood it was only the opening move. The alien's words pressed on like a weight he could not cast aside. He had been drawn into something greater, forces moving across the stars, wars he could not name, truths his kind had yet to imagine. He did not know whether he had been chosen, or merely caught in a storm too large to escape. Either way, his life was no longer his alone. The fire dwindled to its last embers, painting the ground in faint orange glow. Two figures lingered there, shadows etched against the dying light. One of flesh and bone, weary but unyielding. The other shifting, luminous, marked by strangeness yet bound by the same silence. Together, they shared the last warmth before the cold reclaimed the night. Beyond them stretched the indifferent stars, vast and merciless. Yet in that fragile glow, hope flickered. Against all reason, against all odds, human and alien had not turned away. and in their fragile togetherness lay the first spark of defiance.